Okay, it's time to talk a little bit about our exclusive right to sell contract. This is, of course, our listing contract. So it's a fairly short document. Let's talk about some details that can help you get this taken care of. First of all, you obviously have to have some dates here. Okay, you want to go ahead and try to allow enough time to sell the house, okay? So a listing contract is not going to be for a weekend. As with a buyer, you might represent a buyer and say, I could sign this for you for the weekend. Let's just look at some houses. For a listing, you need to give it some time. Gosh, 3 months at the very least, and that feels really short to me. I would say 6 months is a nice solid figure to begin your contract with. Hopefully you're going to get all of this taken care of. You're going to really start marketing it hard, and it would be wonderful if it were under contract within a month, which would put it closing within 3 months. So 6 months is plenty of time, but I would give it that and say, look, we don't know what's going to happen. We want to sell this quickly, and we're going to do everything we can, but just in case, let's not have to revisit this paperwork every few weeks. So once the house sells, you're no longer under contract either. So I don't know if anybody is ever nervous about that, but this is a contract to sell one property, and when that has been done, the contract is completed, regardless of what dates are on here. Okay, property address, the legal description, lot, block, subdivision. Okay, primarily any resale, you're talking subdivision. If you've got new construction, if you're working for a builder or something in that regard, then sure, lot, block. This is good information to have, but once a house has been lived in, then pretty much that becomes secondary information that most people won't really care about. TMS, that's the tax map number, and you're going to find that on the tax records. If the house has been listed before, you will see it on that other listing, and hopefully it's right. You always need to double check this with the tax records from the particular county that the house is located in. That's got to be correct. And then, of course, the county. Okay, so moving forward to agency relationships. This is the same thing you see on the buyer agency form as well. So the first thing is simply asking, hey, do you understand what agency is? And of course, they're going to, because they will have seen the LLR form and the URE agency form that we've got, which basically repeats it. And so they're going to have had a double dose of it. They should know exactly what that is, and they'll be initialing right there. That's a given. They must do that. Then you come down here, and just as with the buyer agency paperwork, you're going to be discussing dual and designated agency. Really, the best scenario is to say, listen, let's at least talk about it. Okay, when the time comes, let's talk about it. So the fact that it is dual agent and designated agent may be considered at the time of any offer. So your seller may not be comfortable with you holding both sides of the deal. That's totally fine. That's where a designated agency will come in, and you would say, that's okay, I don't need to represent the buyer. I'm going to hand that off to a trusted associate. Dual agency is more likely to come up because another united agent within the same brokerage, meaning under your same broker in charge, may bring the buyer. And if that's the case, it is dual agency because, of course, we know that the broker in charge is technically everybody's agent. So this is something that is important for your clients to at least consider. Okay, so you really should be having them initial the second and the fourth lines and then discussing things in more detail when an offer comes in. Sale price, you need to come up with a sale price. So after doing your comps and having a discussion with the client, et cetera, there is a price that you will be listing at as the listing begins. Compensation, this is a very important section because many people don't seem to understand how this is worded. Compensation means what will the seller be paying in commissions for this transaction. It doesn't mean what are they paying you, it means what are they paying in commissions. So it's the total, okay? In all likelihood, it's going to be in the neighborhood of 6%, right? That's kind of a standard figure that we all land on. And within that figure, you're going to put whatever percentage is it 5%? Is it 6%? And then you're going to explain how that will be distributed. So before we get to the distribution of it, let's talk about something. Okay, so this whole section is explaining at what point the seller would be obligated to pay commission to agents. Okay, so there's all this that goes on. There is a blank here under number 5 for blank days after the expiration of the authorization period. The owner sells or obtains a contract to sell the property to any prospects with whom the owner, broker, or any real estate licensee communicated during the authorization period. Oh, what does that say? What it means is if you had the house listed and a buyer came in while you had the house listed, okay, and then didn't do anything, nothing happened, and then your listing period ends and the house remains unlisted, the buyer then comes back to the seller and negotiates a deal on his own. Okay, you are technically due a commission for your side of it for bringing that buyer. So it happened during your listing period. That's technically how it should work. This is trying to prevent buyers and sellers from going around the agents and from the seller to say, hey, I'll cut you a deal. Let's get rid of these agents. I don't want to pay any commission. I'll cut you a deal. So to prevent that, this is what we have in here. 2 things about that. First, if the seller simply allows this time to expire and your listing agreement expires, or if you part ways before the listing agreement expires and then he hires another agent, okay, then this paragraph is moot anyway. You're not getting paid. Once the house is listed by somebody else, anything that happens is that agent's deal. Okay, so this paragraph only applies if the house is not relisted. Now, let's say the house isn't relisted and a buyer comes. We're going to have to look at how egregious the transaction is, what they actually did. Are we going to pursue that? And again, is that going to be worth it? It might be worth it. It might be a very calculated effort to do something like this. But to get the money, let's figure out whether it's worth it in the long run to pursue that course of action. So we just have to be careful with this paragraph, but hopefully it's enough to make the seller think twice about entering into any sort of a side deal with anybody. That's all. That's more of what it is, and I promise you, you don't need to go into great detail about that when you're talking to your sellers. You want to just say, yeah, this is just a period of 60 days or 90 days. That if I brought a buyer and then, you know, our agreement was to expire, then, you know, I would still get paid. It's no big deal, right? I mean, we need to move past it and not accuse the seller of even contemplating anything like this before you've even begun the deal, you know. So just be real careful about that, but that is what that paragraph basically states. So, okay, so moving back, when you're establishing a percentage, put in this line the total percentage that will be paid, okay? So that's a 5% or a 6% or whatever it is. And then down at the top of the second page is where you're going to be establishing who gets paid what. So you're telling your seller how you're going to split this up. You're going to say, listen, I'm paying the buyer's agent 3% here. So just wanted you to know that. And sometimes you may need to establish a dollar amount if the house is a lower price property. Maybe everybody needs to establish that each side is going to get $1,000. So maybe it's not a percentage. Maybe it's a dollar figure, $1,500, whatever it is. So at least everybody's making a little something out of it. So anyway, that's where you establish what the buyer's agent. Okay, and I'd like to suggest, if you are making a deal with your seller, say your seller is also buying something and you're getting the buyer side on that, and you say, great, I'll discount you a little bit on the selling side, do not make the buyer agent suffer for your deal. Okay, so if you're doing a 5%, then you still want to give the buyer's agent 3%. and you'll keep the 2%. Okay, the buyer's agent didn't cut that deal, you cut that deal. So try to be a little respectful of that. Transaction brokerage, we will work with a transaction broker, but we've established that they can get 1% of the sale price, or whatever dollar amount. If it's a dollar amount deal, then you're going to want it to be less. If everybody, buyer's agent, list agent's going to get $1,500, then maybe a transaction broker would get $500. Just establish what they might get paid, okay, in the event that a transaction broker enters this deal. It's important to answer question E. Is it going to be in the MLS? Of course it's going to be in the MLS. How are we going to market it? We really want this to be in the MLS, so it would have to be a very specific circumstance for it not to be. Will the owner allow a lockbox on the property? Okay, and that's a CMLS lockbox. That is a, we like these lockboxes. They're Bluetooth. They help us keep track of things. It's a great way to know who's been in and out of the property. It's a good informational tool. We want to have a lockbox, but not every instance will a lockbox be appropriate. Sometimes some sellers may not want that. Some houses may be too expensive for that. Maybe you say, we're not just going to let anybody in. We have to get a little extra information before anybody is seeing this house. So that's a conversation that needs to happen with the owner. Marketing the property in section F. Yeah, you need to figure out what you can do as far as for sale signs are concerned. There are some neighborhoods that have very specific for sale signs. Some don't allow for sale signs, so you have to figure out how you're going to market this property. Broker may place on the internet. Please let the answer be yes. Again, if you can't put it on the internet, this is going to be a very challenging project for you. Okay, obviously we need to have pictures. Again, pictures are really crucial, particularly in this day and age. So hopefully the owner will consent and say yes. Okay. So now, again, much as in the buyer agency agreement, please make sure that you understand this well enough to explain any questions about this document to your client as they're reading through it. It's pretty straightforward, but just in case, if you have any questions about it, give us a call. Section I indicates that your sellers will be completing a property disclosure, and there are a few, and only a few, specific instances where they don't need to. So really make sure that they understand this is something that they will be doing, and you can give them some general guidance on how the form is completed, but you can't answer the questions for them and you can't do it for them. Okay. Fixtures, personal property. Again, all of these are pretty straightforward paragraphs, but please be comfortable with them so that you can have a conversation if they want to have a conversation. Special stipulations. So what we have done in the past is sometimes, you want to say, you say to yourself, I'm not interested in making a deal on this listing. It's a pretty straightforward listing. I don't know why I should have to discount any services. So let's say, though, that you strike a deal with the seller. Tell you what, seller, if I bring the buyer myself, then you only need to pay me 4%. So that actually works out okay for you. You're getting 4% of a deal, right? And the seller feels like he's saving 2%. Here's the thing. The odds of you bringing the buyer to your own listing are relatively small. So this might be a good deal to strike. Say, you know what? I'm perfectly fine making this deal. This is where you would put it in special stipulations. You would say, if list agent brings the buyer, then seller will pay total of 4% commission. That sort of thing. You could write it like that. And that way, if you don't bring the buyer, then you don't have to deal with that, and it's a 6% listing. So if you can sometimes work things that way. So if you have a special deal that you're making with the seller, if a particular situation occurs, this is where you would write it. Okay, E&O, we do have E&O, of course. And that's about it. I mean, there we are. We're at the end of this relatively short form. So you have the owner or owners sign. And if there are two owners, okay, even if it's a divorcing couple, you need to have both of them sign it if they're both owners of that house. If they're still both on the title, you've got to deal with both of them. So it's really important to know who owns the house. Can they sell the house? Who owns it? All of them need to sign this because two people can't sell it if there's a third person who owns it and they don't agree to it. This is really important. So that's another task that you have to take care of. An email for each, a mailing address. Again, if they've already moved for some reason, we need to know how to reach them if we're going to send them something. And now here we see very clearly on here, there's a broker signature and there is an agent name. So you can have your name on this listing, but you need to make sure that your broker in charge is signing this. There is no agency if the broker in charge does not sign this. So be really careful about that. I want to point out one thing here, the office ID. This is something important that everybody should know because it also shows up again when you're writing an offer. Your office ID is the LLR code for the particular office where your license hangs. So on your pocket license, you have your license number in one corner and the office license number in the other corner. Okay, so it's pretty easy to find. You can look it up on LLR as well. You will see the office code for your office. But that's what that means. Whenever anybody's asking for an office code or office ID, it's the LLR code for your particular office. So there we go, and I hope that was clear enough. Thank you very much.